No.
I got some music.
What kind of music we playing?
Let me see. Give me that.
You gotta get your phone.
Okay.
You record.
We got any watchers?
Watch me whip?
No,
not
We
playing
ain't got no watchers.
No, we don't have no watch. We got one.
Who is that?
Shit.
On March 12, 2021, in the parking lot of Hunter Square Apartments in Norfolk, Virginia, 2 women's lives ended in a moment of violence that would devastate a family and shock a community. Behind the headlines and police reports were 2 individuals with full lives, dreams, and profound connections to those around them. This is the story of Morgan Bazimore and her mother Alicia Herafford, not just as victims, but as the vibrant people they were before tragedy struck. Morgan Benita Bazimore was born on February 9, 1998, in Norfolk, Virginia. At just 23 years old, her presence commanded attention. Those who knew Morgan described her as someone who entered rooms with unmistakable energy, bold, expressive, and unafraid to be herself. As a competitive cheerleader at Maury High School, she developed the discipline and teamwork that would shape her character long after graduation in 2016. Fashion was more than a casual interest for Morgan. It was a form of self-expression. Her social media showcased a young woman with evolving style and confidence. After high school, Morgan worked various jobs in retail and customer service, building independence while staying connected to her Norfolk community. Like many young adults, she balanced work responsibilities with the social life that brought out her, spending time with friends, enjoying music, and embracing the experiences of early adulthood. But there was another side to Morgan that few outside her inner circle saw. She carried a strength forged through challenges, including navigating a relationship that had grown increasingly complex and troubled. This resilience, perhaps inherited from her mother, would be tested repeatedly throughout her short life. Alicia Ann Herafford, born on Christmas Day 1968, lived a life guided by compassion and purpose. At 52, Alicia had built a career dedicated to protecting society's most vulnerable. As both a hotline specialist for Child Protective Services and the manager of the emergency shelter program at Samaritan House in Virginia Beach, she stood on the front lines helping families and individuals in crisis. The symmetry between Alicia's professional and personal life was striking. The same dedication she showed to strangers in need extended to her own family. Colleagues knew her as someone who approached difficult situations with calm determination, a quality essential in crisis intervention work. This steady presence made her a respected figure, both professionally and in her community. What made Alicia remarkable wasn't just her dedication to helping others, but how she balanced this demanding work with raising her children. Like many working mothers, she navigated the complexities of career and family life, making sacrifices that often went unacknowledged, but were foundational to her children's development. The bond between Morgan and Alicia went beyond typical mother-daughter relationships. They shared similar expressive personalities, though channeled in different ways. Morgan through her social nature and fashion, Alicia through her steadfast support of others. Their relationship had weathered the standard tensions of adolescence and evolved into a deeper adult connection based on mutual respect and understanding. Completing this family circle was Marvin Eli Bazimore Jr., Morgan's fraternal twin brother. The twins shared the unique connection that often exists between siblings born minutes apart, a silent understanding and lifetime of shared experiences. While different in personality, their bond remained unbreakable, with Marvin often serving as a stabilizing presence in Morgan's life. This trio, mother and twins, formed a resilient family unit that had faced challenges together, but remained connected through genuine love and shared history. No one could have predicted how their story would change on that March evening, or how a relationship's dangerous dynamics would eventually culminate in an unthinkable act of violence. Before we continue with this story, I want to thank you for joining me today. Stories like Morgan and Alicia's matter because they remind us that behind every statistic are real people with full lives. If you're finding value in this exploration of their story, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps this channel reach others who appreciate in-depth true crime analysis. Subscribe if you haven't already, and enable notifications to stay updated on new documentaries that examine cases with the respect and thoroughness they deserve. Now, let's examine the relationship that would ultimately lead to this tragedy, and the warning signals that went unnoticed. Morgan Bazimore's relationship with Kenyatta Jones began like many others, with promise and possibility. Jones, a 29-year-old Norfolk resident, entered Morgan's life when she was in her early 20s. What started as a typical courtship gradually transformed into something more complicated and concerning for those who knew Morgan best. Their connection was characterized by extreme highs and devastating lows, a relationship pattern that experts recognize as common in situations that eventually turn dangerous. Friends observed how Morgan would seem withdrawn after arguments with Jones, only to return to her vibrant self during periods of reconciliation. This on-again, off-again dynamic persisted for several years, creating an unstable foundation that made breaking away increasingly difficult. The troubling nature of their relationship became a matter of public record in 2018 when Morgan accused Jones of physical abuse. This incident resulted in assault and battery charges against him, a serious legal marker that should have served as a decisive moment. However, as often happens in complex abusive relationships, legal consequences alone weren't enough to permanently sever the connection between them. Court documents from the 2018 case revealed a pattern that would continue until the fatal night in 2021. The charges represented not an isolated incident, but rather the culmination of escalating behavior that had finally crossed a threshold where Morgan felt compelled to involve authorities. Yet despite this formal involvement of the legal system, the relationship continued, with periods of separation followed by reconciliation. The assault case highlighted a concerning truth about domestic violence interventions. Legal action alone, without comprehensive support systems and follow-through, often fails to create lasting safety. For Morgan, the court case represented just one moment in a longer journey that would continue for another 3 years. Jones exercised control in ways both obvious and subtle. According to those close to Morgan, he monitored her whereabouts, questioned her about male friends, and often inserted himself into her social plans. These behaviors intensified over time, evolving from occasional jealousy to persistent monitoring. Financial dynamics also played a role. Jones would alternate between lavish gifts that created a sense of obligation and periods where he would monitor Morgan's spending or criticize her financial choices. This economic aspect of their relationship added another layer of complexity to Morgan's situation, making independence more difficult to achieve. Communication between them followed predictable but destructive patterns. Arguments that began over minor issues would escalate rapidly, with Jones often resorting to intimidation tactics. After conflicts, Morgan would receive excessive apologies and promises of change, temporarily restoring hope until the cycle inevitably repeated. The most concerning element was Jones' inability to manage anger. His emotional responses were disproportionate to situations, creating an environment where Morgan became increasingly careful about what she said or did. This walking on eggshells existence is a recognized indicator of psychological abuse, as victims modify their behavior to avoid triggering their partner's anger. Several opportunities for effective intervention arose, but ultimately failed to create safety for Morgan. After the 2018 charges, court-mandated anger management classes were ordered for Jones, but completion of these programs rarely addresses deeper patterns of controlling behavior. Morgan's mother, Alicia, with her professional background in crisis intervention, recognized the danger signs. Family members reported that she had attempted several conversations with Morgan about leaving the relationship permanently. These efforts, while well-intentioned, confronted the powerful psychological bonds that form in abusive relationships, bonds that often strengthen rather than weaken during periods of crisis. Friends had also noticed concerning behaviors and attempted informal interventions. One friend had even offered Morgan a place to stay during a particularly difficult period. However, without coordinated professional support, these individual efforts couldn't overcome the complex dynamics at play. The most significant systemic failure was the lack of follow-up after the initial legal charges. While the criminal justice system processed the assault case, the absence of ongoing monitoring and support services left Morgan vulnerable to renewed contact and the persuasive promises of change that Jones consistently offered. By early 2021, the relationship had reached a dangerous equilibrium. To outside observers, Morgan and Jones continued their inconsistent relationship with periodic conflicts. But beneath this surface, tensions were building toward the confrontation that would ultimately claim 2 lives. What should have been a minor disagreement about going to a nightclub would instead become the trigger for an unthinkable act of violence. March 12, 2021, started as an ordinary Friday in Norfolk, Virginia. The weather was mild for early spring, with temperatures in the low 60s, the kind of evening that beckoned people outdoors after a long winter. For 23-year-old Morgan Bazimore, the evening held promise. She had plans to go out to enjoy the night at a local nightclub with friends, a simple pleasure that would set in motion the events leading to tragedy. Morgan was at Hunter Square Apartments that evening, a residential complex where many young professionals and families made their homes. The complex, with its standard brick facade and surrounding parking lots, became the unlikely stage for what would unfold. Earlier that day, Morgan had communicated with Kenyatta Jones, and at some point, they agreed to meet. By early evening, both Morgan and Jones were in the parking lot of the apartment complex. What began as a conversation quickly evolved into something more serious. According to witness statements collected later, Morgan expressed her intention to go to a nightclub that night, a seemingly innocuous plan that somehow triggered intense opposition from Jones. The disagreement about Morgan's nightclub plans rapidly intensified. Witnesses in nearby apartments reported hearing raised voices around 9:30 p.m. The argument wasn't simply about that evening's plans, but seemed to touch on deeper issues of autonomy and control that had long characterized their relationship. As voices grew louder, several residents became aware of the situation developing in the parking lot. At least 3 witnesses later described seeing Morgan and Jones in an animated conversation that grew increasingly heated. One resident, watching from a second-floor window, observed Jones gesturing forcefully while Morgan appeared to be trying to create distance between them. The argument continued for approximately 20 minutes, moving across the parking lot as Morgan attempted to de-escalate the situation multiple times. Phone records would later show that during this time, Morgan made a brief call, possibly to her mother Alicia or to a friend seeking support or intervention. At approximately 10:15 p.m., the confrontation reached its breaking point. Jones, whose anger had been building throughout the argument, produced a firearm. In a moment that forever altered multiple lives, he fired 2 shots at Morgan. One bullet struck her temple, causing fatal injuries. Morgan collapsed to the pavement of the parking lot, her plans for the evening and all her future prospects extinguished in an instant. Alicia Herafford, Morgan's mother, was either already present or arrived moments after hearing about the confrontation. Her presence at the scene speaks to the protective instinct that had defined her relationship with her daughter throughout their lives. As a professional who had spent decades helping others in crisis, Alicia rushed toward danger rather than away from it when her daughter was threatened. This maternal intervention proved fatal. Upon seeing Alicia, Jones turned his weapon toward her. He fired 3 times, with bullets striking her back and chest. These injuries left no chance for survival. Mother and daughter lay wounded in the parking lot, their lives ending just feet apart from one another. The sound of gunshots prompted multiple calls to emergency services. Norfolk Police Department records show the first 911 call came at 10:17 p.m., with several more following in quick succession. Officers arrived within minutes to discover the devastating scene. As first responders attended to Morgan and Alicia, Jones had already fled the location. A resident's vehicle dash camera captured a brief image of him leaving the area immediately after the shootings. This crucial piece of evidence would later help investigators establish a timeline and confirm Jones' presence at the scene. Police secured the area and began collecting evidence. Among the most significant findings was the discovery of a firearm in Morgan's purse. This detail suggested that she may have felt threatened enough to carry protection, though she never had the opportunity to use it. Investigators also recovered shell casings and began the process of interviewing witnesses. The investigation faced immediate challenges as several potential witnesses expressed reluctance to provide formal statements. Fear of potential retaliation created a barrier to gathering complete information, a common complication in cases involving domestic violence. This hesitancy would later impact the legal proceedings against Jones. By midnight, both Morgan Bazimore and Alicia Herafford had been pronounced dead. The Norfolk community, particularly those who knew them through Alicia's extensive social work or Morgan's vibrant social presence, began to process the shocking loss. 2 lives had ended over what appeared to be a trivial disagreement about going to a nightclub, though the deeper causes stretch back through years of relationship dysfunction and missed opportunities for intervention. I know this part of the story is difficult to hear. 2 lives cut short in such a senseless act of violence deserves our full attention and understanding. If you're finding value in this detailed account, please take a moment to hit the like button and share this video with others who care about these important issues. Your engagement helps ensure stories like Morgan and Alicia's reach more people, potentially making a difference for someone in a similar situation. Subscribe now if you haven't already to support this kind of in-depth coverage. In the next segment, we'll examine how law enforcement built their case against Kenyatta Jones and the surprising discoveries that emerged during the investigation. In the hours following the shootings, Norfolk Police Department launched a comprehensive investigation. Evidence technicians processed the Hunter Square Apartments parking lot until dawn, collecting shell casings, photographing the scene, and establishing the exact positions where Morgan Bazimore and Alicia Herafford had fallen. The crime scene told a partial story, but investigators knew that witness testimony would be crucial to securing a conviction. The dash camera footage captured by a resident's vehicle proved invaluable, providing visual confirmation of Jones leaving the scene immediately after the shootings. This digital evidence established a clear timeline that placed him at the location during the critical moments when the violence occurred. However, technical limitations of the recording meant that the actual shootings weren't captured, requiring investigators to reconstruct those moments through other means. Multiple households in the apartment complex provided initial statements, though these accounts contained inconsistencies in specific details. A common occurrence when different people witness traumatic events from various vantage points. Despite these variations, the statements collectively confirmed a violent altercation between Jones and the victims immediately before gunshots were heard. Ballistics testing matched the recovered shell casings to a model of firearm consistent with witness descriptions. The medical examiner's report confirmed that Morgan had been shot twice, with 1 bullet striking her temple, while Alicia had suffered 3 gunshot wounds to her back and chest. These forensic findings aligned with the witness accounts about how the confrontation had unfolded. As investigators processed the scene and examined vehicles belonging to the victims, they made an unexpected discovery that added another layer of complexity to the case. Hidden in Alicia Herafford's car was $250,000 in cash. This substantial sum, concealed within the vehicle amid the chaos of the domestic dispute, raised immediate questions about its source and significance. The discovery prompted a parallel investigation into the origin of these funds. Detectives examined Alicia's financial records and interviewed colleagues from both Child Protective Services and the Samaritan House, where she had worked as the Emergency Shelter Program Manager. Nothing in her employment history or known financial situation explained the presence of such a large amount of cash. Investigators considered multiple possibilities. Was this money connected to the shootings? Had Alicia been saving the funds to help Morgan leave her relationship with Jones? Was it intended for some other purpose entirely? Despite extensive inquiry, definitive answers remained elusive, leaving this aspect of the case surrounded by speculation. The discovery of the money created additional legal complications that extended beyond the criminal case against Jones. With both Morgan and Alicia deceased, questions about the rightful ownership of the $250,000 triggered a series of legal disputes that would continue long after the criminal proceedings concluded. family members, including Morgan's twin brother, Marvin Bazimore Jr., became entangled in probate proceedings to determine the proper distribution of these unexpected assets. Court documents from these proceedings revealed the complexity of establishing ownership when the principals involved could no longer provide explanations. After prolonged litigation involving multiple hearings and legal filings, the court ultimately awarded the funds to Marvin Bazimore Jr. as Alicia's surviving son. This resolution, while legally sound, did little to answer the underlying questions about why Alicia had kept such a large sum hidden in her vehicle. Perhaps the most significant obstacle in building a comprehensive case against Kenyatta Jones was the reluctance of key witnesses to provide formal testimony. Initial statements given the night of the murders were followed by increasing hesitation from several individuals who had observed crucial aspects of the confrontation. Investigators noted that this reluctance stemmed primarily from fear of potential retaliation. Despite assurances from law enforcement about witness protection measures, several people who had initially cooperated began to distance themselves from the case as the possibility of a trial approached. This pattern of witness intimidation, whether explicit or implied, created substantial challenges for prosecutors attempting to build a solid case. Without consistent, reliable witness testimony to corroborate the physical evidence, the strength of the case against Jones was compromised. Prosecutors found themselves in the difficult position of balancing the pursuit of justice with the practical limitations imposed by uncooperative witnesses. Based on the available evidence, Kenyatta Jones was initially charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. These charges reflected the prosecutor's assessment that while the killings weren't premeditated in the legal sense, they represented intentional acts of violence resulting in death. As the case progressed, the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office had to make strategic decisions based on the evidentiary challenges they faced. The dash camera footage placed Jones at the scene, and ballistics evidence supported the sequence of events. But without strong witness testimony, securing convictions on the original charges would be difficult. This reality forced prosecutors to consider alternative approaches that would ensure Jones faced consequences while acknowledging the practical limitations of their case. The resulting legal strategy would lead to a resolution that many in the community would find unsatisfying, raising questions about whether justice had truly been served for Morgan and Alicia. By early 2023, the case against Kenyatta Jones had reached a critical juncture. Facing 2 counts of second-degree murder for the deaths of Morgan Bazimore and Alicia Herafford, Jones and his defense team entered negotiations with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. These discussions occurred against the backdrop of significant evidentiary challenges, particularly the continued reluctance of key witnesses to testify. Prosecutors faced a difficult decision: proceed to trial with compromised witness testimony and risk an acquittal, or secure a guaranteed conviction through a plea agreement. After weighing these options, they opted for the latter approach. The resulting agreement represented what prosecutors determined was achievable given the constraints they faced. Under the terms of this agreement, Jones would plead guilty to 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter instead of the original second-degree murder charges. This reduction in charges acknowledged both the intentional nature of the killings and the evidentiary limitations of the case. The agreement ensured Jones would face consequences while eliminating the uncertainty of a trial outcome. On July 14, 2023, more than 2 years after the shootings at Hunter Square Apartments, Jones formally entered his guilty plea in Norfolk Circuit Court. The judge accepted the plea after confirming that Jones understood the charges and was entering his plea voluntarily. With this legal step, the case moved toward its resolution, though many questions about that March night in 2021 remained unanswered. Following the acceptance of the plea agreement, Jones received his sentence: 8 years of active incarceration in a Virginia state prison facility. This period would be followed by an additional 12 years of suspended sentence, creating a total sentence of 20 years that allowed for Jones's eventual return to society while maintaining long-term supervision. The suspended portion of the sentence came with specific conditions that would govern Jones's behavior during and after his active incarceration. Most notably, he would be required to maintain absolutely no contact with the victim's family, including Morgan's twin brother Marvin. Additionally, Jones would be subject to strict behavioral conditions and regular supervision once released. These requirements aim to provide ongoing protection for the surviving family members while creating a framework of accountability that extended beyond the period of active incarceration. The court's approach reflected an attempt to balance punishment with monitoring and behavioral controls designed to prevent future violence. News of the plea agreement and sentencing spread quickly through Norfolk, generating strong responses from those who had known Morgan and Alicia. Many in the community expressed disappointment at what they perceived as an insufficient punishment for the taking of 2 lives. The reduction from murder charges to voluntary manslaughter struck many as a failure of the justice system to properly account for the gravity of Jones's actions. For those familiar with Alicia's decades of service as a social worker, the outcome seemed particularly unjust. Colleagues from Child Protective Services and the Samaritan House organized memorial events that both honored her legacy and provided forums for discussing improvements to the legal system's handling of domestic violence cases. Morgan's friends, particularly those who had witnessed the troubled dynamics of her relationship with Jones, expressed frustration that earlier warning signs hadn't led to more effective interventions. Some channeled this frustration into advocacy, connecting with local domestic violence prevention organizations to share Morgan's story as a cautionary example. The family's reaction remained largely private, with Marvin Bazimore Jr. focusing on moving forward while honoring the memory of his mother and twin sister. The award of the $250,000 found in Alicia's car represented a complicated inheritance, financial assistance that came at an unfathomable cost. The case of Morgan Bazimore and Alicia Herafford highlighted several critical gaps in the system designed to protect victims of domestic violence. The previous documented incident in 2018, which had resulted in assault charges against Jones, represented a missed opportunity for more comprehensive intervention. Despite this official record of violence, insufficient mechanisms existed to monitor the ongoing threat or provide adequate protection. The difficulty in securing witness cooperation illustrated how fear continues to obstruct justice in domestic violence cases. Without improvements to witness protection programs and community education about the importance of testimony, similar cases will continue to face evidentiary challenges that limit prosecutorial options. Perhaps most significantly, the case demonstrated how conventional legal approaches often fail to address the complex nature of abusive relationships. The cyclical pattern of violence, reconciliation, and escalation that characterized Morgan and Jones's relationship is common in domestic abuse situations, yet the legal system typically engages only at moments of crisis, rather than addressing the underlying behavioral patterns. Several practical prevention approaches emerge from examining this case. First, early recognition of abuse patterns must be coupled with immediate and sustained intervention. The 2018 incident provided a clear indication of danger that should have triggered comprehensive monitoring and support. Second, improved protection for individuals attempting to leave dangerous relationships is essential. The most dangerous period in an abusive relationship often occurs when the victim attempts to separate from their abuser. Had Morgan had access to secure housing, financial support, and ongoing protection during attempts to leave Jones, the outcome might have been different. Third, enhanced witness protection programs could encourage more people to come forward with crucial testimony. The reluctance of witnesses to participate in the legal process directly impacted the prosecution's ability to secure appropriate charges. Fourth, community education about domestic violence warning signs enables friends, family, and neighbors to recognize dangerous situations before they escalate to violence. Recognizing controlling behaviors, isolation tactics, and emotional manipulation as precursors to physical violence creates opportunities for earlier intervention. As we conclude this examination of Morgan and Alicia's story, I want to emphasize that their lives mattered far beyond the tragedy of how they ended. If this video has affected you or made you think differently about domestic violence, please take action. Like and share this video to spread awareness, and subscribe to support more content that brings attention to these critical issues. If you recognize patterns from this story in your own relationship or that of someone you care about, reach out to domestic violence resources in your area. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. Remember that early intervention saves lives. Morgan and Alicia deserved better from our systems and society. By learning from their story, we honor their memory and work toward preventing similar tragedies. Thank you for bearing witness to their story.